This year, we saw some former NHL lottery teams breaking out in a big way like the Vancouver Canucks and the Nashville Predators, but next year in 2025, who will be the lottery team that surprises the NHL? Today, we're going to be taking a look at the worst teams in the NHL to see which teams could rise up, break out in a big way, or disappoint once again. So make sure you watch till the end as we go through every team and potentially your favorite team as well to see if they can make it. And hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this all throughout the year. What we're going to do today is go through every team that'll miss the playoffs, what they could likely do in the offseason to get better or worse, and ultimately come up with a chance that they will make the playoffs next year. And we're going to start out with the lowly San Jose Sharks. The big problem with the San Jose Sharks is they've stripped down so much that even if everything goes right, I still don't think they'll be in playoff contention. Even if Will Smith signs, even if they get Macklin Celebrini first overall, even if they make a couple of additions here or there, it's still not going to be good enough. They tore this roster down completely, and it's going to be quite a few years before we see San Jose reap the rewards. I still give the Sharks at least 2 more years of full Shark Tank rebuilding mode before they can make some progress in the Pacific, but Mike Grier and that coaching staff have done this by design, stripping down all of these parts to hopefully build something better, but the Sharks won't be making the playoffs anytime soon. Crazier things have happened, but I'm going to give them a 0.1% chance of making the playoffs. Next, we're going to talk about Connor Bedard's Chicago Blackhawks, but first, let's talk about today's sponsor in Sleeper Fantasy. Sleeper, of course, is the best place to win big with your hockey knowledge. All you guys got to do is pick more or less on different players in any sport, but of course, with the NHL picks, you guys know I love to do it. And not just winning big, it's just fun to make NHL picks and pick more or less on different guys, whether it be with shots on goal, goals, assists, points, power play points, any option is available to you. And today we got 3 different picks on 3 young players I love watching. More than 0.5 points on Caulfield, Boldy, and Lucas Raymond. And all 3 of these guys have been absolutely on fire as of late. And you know what? We're going to ride over the young guns today as a little bit of a theme for today's picks. Putting $10 down to win 33. And of course, if you guys want to sign up to Sleeper, go in the description and use promo code GRAV on your first deposit, and you'll get up to a $500 match. If you put in $20, you'll get $20 free in Sleeper. It's a great way to start out. Sleeper has actually been a big reason why I've been able to make more videos for you guys each week, so hopefully you enjoy. And of course, thank you to Sleeper Fantasy for sponsoring today's video. Now let's move on to the second to last place team in the NHL, in the Chicago Blackhawks, who will have a fascinating season next year as we see a lot of the younger players finally step into the roster. You got Frank Nazar, who has scored his first NHL goal recently and will be a big part of that middle 6. You also got Landon Slager as a really the under-the-radar rookie for next year on that bottom 6 too. You also got Lucas Reichel, who will hopefully not have a disaster of a season next year and will be able to establish him in that top 6. It's not a crazy amount of new options, but it's good enough and a lot of young players that will beef up that forward group. You also, of course, got Vlasic and Korchinski having their second years, Ethan Del Mastro as well, potentially fitting out of that defense, and it looks quite a bit better. The thing is, though, I think this next year, 2025, will be the last season we see Chicago truly in the dumpster. Even though it's only a little bit better than San Jose, I'm going to give Chicago a 3% chance of making the playoffs. With Bedard, it's never 0. You can never count them out completely. But now with San Jose and Chicago gone, we're now getting into the teams that I could actually see making the playoffs in a pretty healthy world. And the third worst team in the league this year was the Anaheim Ducks, who I don't think would surprise anybody if they were to take a massive leap. This year was pretty brutal. After starting off amazingly, they just absolutely crumbled, and right now in 81 games have 57 points. But I do think with how much Anaheim has really stocked up for the future, it would be almost impossible not to improve next year. You also consider the wealth of cap space, $33 million to work with for next year, and that could aid in getting some veterans, some guys to shore up that depth like they did with Gudas and Killorn this last offseason, and Anaheim could be a kind of sneaky team in the conversation here. You got a top 6 that is looking fascinating for next year. With Cutter Gauthier officially signed, they'll have him, Leo Carlson, Troy Terry, Zegras, Vetrano, Strome, Killorn. There's so many different options there, and offensively, they are going to get the job done. The defense, though, is still incredibly young. Besides Cam Fowler and Radko Gudas, you have a lot of younger players wanting to prove themselves, like Gustav Lindstrom, Vakinen, Lacombe. You have also, of course, the big guns in Olin Zellweger and Pavel Mintyukov. And even though it's a crowded defense, there could be a lot of turnover. To me, the big question marks are the health for the Ducks, which was a major problem this year, losing so many guys at different points in the year, and also just how that team adapts. Even though they have the younger roster, are they going to be able to take that leap? Is the depth going to be good enough to shore that up? Are they going to use that cap space this offseason to add some big bulk onto that bottom six, onto that defense? Those will be the major question marks for me. But if they do, I think I could see Anaheim being in a pretty strong position next year. And even though I don't think they'll make the playoffs, you can never really count them out with the youth they have, the roster they have coming up. So I'm going to give them a 20% chance of making it. Not too shabby. Now we go to a team that I would love to be a lot more optimistic about, and that is the Columbus Blue Jackets. I would love to tell you that all this youth coming up would be so beneficial for them and that they're going to be an absolute rock star team next year, but I really don't see that happening. There's just been so much dysfunction around this Blue Jackets team, and you guys know I love a lot of the players on that roster, a lot of the young prospects and players they have coming up, but to me there's just been so much confusion, just too much dysfunction for me to be on this Blue Jackets team right now. Though we could see a situation where they get the new GM, they get a new coaching staff, and maybe that's able to turn the tide, but I just don't think that roster is good enough yet to truly compete. I'm going to give the Columbus Blue Jackets an 8% chance of making the playoffs. It's not nothing, but it certainly isn't something. But next up we go on to the Montreal Canadiens, who points-wise did make a little bit of an improvement this year, being around the 75-point range, which is great to see. You want to see those a little bit of adjustments, and especially with the young core, it's not just the goaltending getting them these random wins. You're also seeing this youth wave in Montreal paying dividends. This is the sad thing for me, is that I would love to be on the Montreal playoff train right now if they were in any other division. The Atlantic is just such a wild roller coaster right now, and even though I see the Montreal Canadiens improving, will it be enough? Unfortunately, I think Montreal is a product of their division. If they were in the Atlantic, I think they actually could be in the race next year, but because of their situation, they grade pretty low, and I'm going to give them a 10% chance of making it. Though, I think they will improve quite a bit, be competitive a lot more throughout the season, and that will be a good sign of progress. Next up, we actually go on to the Arizona Coyotes, Salt Lake City Coyotes. Let's just call them Salt Lake for right now. And to me, they're one of the most interesting teams coming into next year, because if they hadn't relocated, I would have been on the Arizona bandwagon hoping for them to make the playoffs next year. But in Salt Lake, we've actually gotten some recent confirmations from new owner Ryan Smith that they are going to be spending big this offseason, which for a roster that already has a lot of young pieces and good ones at that, I think Utah will be pretty competitive. Really, I think they just need to work on the defense, and I think that will be a massive part of their spending. I think we will see Arizona going after a lot of surefire, solid D that will bring some stability onto that defense, and that will be the biggest improvement. Arizona's defense has some interesting options and unique players, but they just don't have a collective group that is really all too sure of playing a full 82-game season and getting the job done. And that, to me, will be a big reason why we could see Salt Lake in the playoff picture already as soon as year one. I'm going to give them a chance of 50%. Honestly, I could see them surprising a lot of people. Next up, we go into the Ottawa Senators, and they are one of the most fascinating teams heading into next year. Of course, as you guys saw in my preseason predictions, they're a team that I saw making the playoffs this year, and that did not happen. Even though I think it'll be hard for Ottawa to get back in the playoff race, I don't think it's impossible, though they have a lot of work to do. In the offseason, I think they need to change up that goaltending. That defense isn't good enough. The depth on the forward group is absolutely disastrous. And you also have to hire probably a completely new coaching staff with the new management coming in. That will be a big thing too. I think Ottawa needs to absolutely win this offseason for them to have a chance at the playoffs. Though, again, with the progression of some of that youth, if they're able to get that defense and that goaltending actually strengthened up and consistent throughout the year, then I think we could see Ottawa bounce back in ways. But I'm still kind of rather low on them with their just whole team outlook and how much needs to change. But I'm still going to give them a 30% chance of making it. Now we go into one of the weirdest teams to talk about in the league right now, and that is the Seattle Kraken, a team that kind of feels like they're in flux. They obviously made the playoffs in their second year and looked like they were on a pretty good trajectory, but this year was disappointing, 79 points in 80 games, and they're looking about in the middle of the pack, which is not where you want to be. And even though I think we'll see Matty Beniers rebound next year and some rookies infused in a lineup like Shane Wright and Riker Evans, who will be pretty good for them, I just don't really see Seattle being in a position to get outside that middle of the pack. To me, maybe they're able to squeak in because of their division, but I just think for Seattle, there's better teams ahead of them. I could see a team like the Anaheim Ducks replacing them in that division, going up ahead of them, just with how middle of the pack they are, with how average they are in almost every single position. I just don't see Seattle's roster being good enough to push ahead. I'm going to give them a 15% chance of making it. It's not nothing, but I'm rather low on them, unless they make some big offseason additions. But hey, maybe Seattle is going in a more retooling, rebuilding direction, and if they are, then maybe that's a good thing. Now we go into a team in a pretty similar position as Seattle, and that is the Calgary Flames. They disappointed a little bit this last year, but don't really have much inspiration heading into the future, or at least to get much better than they are. They have some really great quality pieces, but it's not exactly a completely constructed team up to this point. And they've gone for this retool, getting rid of a lot of assets, whether it be throughout the season or the trade deadline. They've been getting rid of a lot of guys. And I think for Calgary, that'll kind of bite them next year if they try to make the playoffs. I think they'll kind of lay low, though, for this next year, try to get a better pick in 2025, and then maybe get better afterwards. But I don't think Calgary's in an incredible position to make it, but I'm still going to give them a 25% because I do like a lot of the top-end players they have there, and we'll see if that'll be enough to get them. Next up, we go on to one of the teams most likely to make the playoffs out of the lottery bunch this year, in my opinion, and that is the New Jersey Devils, who we saw impressing so much in 2023, just to disappoint and wreck our hearts this year, especially for me, as I predicted them to win the President's friggin' trophy. But even though this year was a major disappointment, you can see why that happened. And with changes being made in the offseason, you could see them getting a lot better. As long as they don't hire Travis Green full-time, I think New Jersey's in a pretty good spot next year. Just stay healthy and get better goaltending, and it's as simple as that. And I do think we will see them have that next year. Whether they're a President's Trophy winning team or not, we'll have to wait and see. But I think New Jersey will get a ticket to the dance at the very least. I'm going to give them an 85% chance of making it, though, of course, with how we saw this year, any disaster could happen. Now we move on to the Buffalo Sabres, who I correctly predicted to have a down year this year and not make the playoffs, but next year might be a different story. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen had been absolutely fantastic in this second half, and if he carries it over alongside Levi, who I think will be a lot more prepared for the NHL next year, the goaltending could be a pretty major strength. But like we saw this year, the offense kind of dried up at a lot of points, and especially for some of their top superstars, they weren't able to produce nearly the lengths they were last season. And I think this last year was a big learning experience for them, and I do think this is the year that we see Buffalo take that next step, finally be back in the playoffs. And hey, I could be stupid saying that, but I do think that learning experiences will be big for them. And even though this year was a disappointment, I think that will bring some success in the future. And next year will finally be the time they make the playoffs. It's not a sure thing, but I'm going to give them 90% chance. I think Buffalo Sabres fans, I'm finally believing again. Now we go into the Minnesota Wild, who I'm kind of fascinated did this well even this season with how rough their year had went in a lot of different ways. I think for Minnesota, they could be interesting, but I just don't think they have the cap space. They don't have the flexibility to get that much better. And to me, with how much some of that core is aging too, and some of the injuries they've already sustained, I think Minnesota's kind of going to be largely in the same position next year, around 80, 85 points, being competitive, but not quite being competitive in the end. And I see for Minnesota a 35% chance of making it. They'll be fine, but like classic Minnesota Wild territory, not good enough to do much. Now we move on to the Philadelphia Flyers, who proved me wrong in a lot of ways this year. And even though they won't make the playoffs, they showed some absolutely insane improvement year over year. And obviously, downing John Tortorella in that way might be foolish. I'm just going to come out and say it. I think the Flyers have a 25% chance of making the playoffs next year. A lot of that is because of the crowded East, and we've seen how the crowded East has kind of bit them in the butt in this playoff race. Just too much competition for Philly to really rise above. And even though I think we'll see a lot of moves this offseason to get more of a surefire year next year for them, I think we might see some more goaltending inconsistencies, and I think that could bite them in the butt quite a bit next year. I just think for Philly, they're too raw yet to be in that position to be a true playoff team that Tortorella might want. And even though I think they'll still make some progress in areas that youth will get better, I just don't see it being good enough. Though, I could be proven wrong just like I was this year. Now we go to the last team that is for sure going to miss the playoffs as of right now, and that is the St. Louis Blues, a team that has been largely decent and okay throughout this year, but again, not good enough to get that playoff spot. And I'm going to give them a 45% chance. I don't think a team like that is as scrappy as they are is ever counted out or should ever be counted out. But the big thing for me is that Jordan Binnington had a legendary year this year, and really one that is not getting talked about enough. He was incredible for St. Louis, especially in this second half. And even then, they weren't really a factor too much in the playoff race. And that to me is a big thing. If Binnington is even average next year, St. Louis is not in the same position. Even though I think we'll see some of that youth improve, I just don't think for St. Louis is going to be good enough with the defensive holes they have and just some of the holes they have on that roster. Now we go to the teams in that Eastern Conference race that are in it, that could be making the playoffs, that could not. And of course, as I'm recording this, we have a couple days left in the NHL season. 3 teams here that are really in the race, really trying to battle for that last spot are the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Detroit Red Wings, and the Washington Capitals. To me, with Pittsburgh, we're going to start out with them. I'm going to give them a 35% chance of success. To me, with Pittsburgh, even though we've seen Crosby, all these guys age pretty blissfully, again, the same problems come up with the cap space, the depth, and the players surrounding them. And even though they've had this miraculous run getting back into the race, it seems like most likely they'll end up missing again. And I just don't see next year being all that different. I see them being in the race again because Sidney Crosby is Sidney Crosby, but just not being able to make it. Though I will give them a 35% because you can never count out Sidney Crosby. Then we got the next team in the race, the Detroit Red Wings, and even if they don't make the playoffs this year, compared to a team like Pittsburgh, they will be okay. To me, they would be one of the most likely teams that they miss to make the playoffs next year. I give them an 85% chance with the young players they have coming up, just getting better and better with Raymond likely becoming a star next year. I do think we'll see Detroit improve, finally being a solidified playoff team next year, whether they make it this year or not. And then last but not least, you got the Washington Capitals, and as this season has proved, you can't really count them out either, and Alex Ovechkin and all the unbelievable success he's had over the past couple of months. But I think for Washington, they might have a better chance than Pittsburgh simply because of some of that youth. I mean, Charlie Lindgren is absolutely insane. We've seen Hendrix Lapierre, we've seen Connor McMichael, we've seen a lot of these younger players actually providing quite a bit of value for the Caps this year. And I think their success might not be sustainable, but maybe more sustainable than the Pittsburgh Penguins. And with the youth they have, could provide some better value in the coming years for them. I'm going to give them a 40% chance. It's not incredible, but it's pretty solid still. A lot better than I would give the Caps at starting of the year, and for next year, I thought they were dead in the water, but they've been proving me wrong. But those are the lottery teams, and in my opinion, their chances of making the playoffs next year. I would love to know your thoughts down below. Out of all of these teams, who do you see making it? Who do you think will make the playoffs? Who do you think will miss the playoffs out of the playoff teams this year? I would love to know all your thoughts down below. Of course, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell if you guys enjoyed this playoff breakdown. So much fun to talk about who can make the playoffs next year. It's going to be a fun battle next season, and I hope you guys stay with the channel for that. And of course, share the video with all the hockey fans you guys know online, and click on this card for all my hockey ratings talk right in one playlist. My name is Nathan, and I will see you in the next one. Have a great day, and goodbye.